Hey everyone, welcome to the 2021 Southern Alberta Rail Crowsnest Subdivision layout tour. Now this is an N-scale layout, and HO guys, before you pull the plug, I want to see if I can show you N-scale in a non-traditional light. N-scale is often thought of as best suited for small space, and I actually think the opposite is true. The small space thing certainly has its purpose, but I think N-scale really shines in a large, wide open space. So we're going to hop on board SAR's private cars. We're going to head east across the layout, meet a few trains, and see if I can get you to think a little differently about this scale. If you want to follow along with the track plan, November 21 issue of Railroad Model Craftsman, feature article, great track plan. Let's go for a ride. This is the first thing you see when you drop down the stairs into the layout. This is the Tunnel 5 area, approximately the midpoint on the layout, and we have the west end and east end staging yards below that. We've got a stack train climbing out of tunnel number 5, and we're going to use that as a marker so you can kind of see how this whole thing ties together. As we look left across the aisle from the tunnel 5 area, we're going to come across the Michelle Creek Narrows between tunnel 6 and tunnel number 7. If you've been following the channel, you know that this is the area that I've been really focused on for the last several months. This is the far western end of the layout, and below it the far eastern end of the layout. Tracks on both levels pop through the backdrop here, spin through the RTC office underneath the stairs before entering staging. From behind the stairs, you can see the entrance to both staging yards. The upper staging yard is the west end of the layout, Sparwood, and the lower is the east end, Fort Macleod. Both yards are virtually identical. Each is 3 tracks folded back over onto themselves to form reverse loops. Each track is a minimum of 40 feet long, and I can store 2 of my longest trains on each track. We're going to send another train off to act as a marker here. CP 9679 is a westbound empty coal train headed to Sparwood. We're going to climb on board SAR's business cars here. Unfortunately, we've drawn 2 dirty old freight units to drag us around. The cars in consist are SAR's HEP power car, Silver Lariat, Silver Rapids, and Silver Solarium. I was fortunate enough to ride the prototype cars about half a dozen times while they were being operated by California Zephyr railcar charters. The cars were sold several years ago to Cuyahoga Valley Scenic, but I've revised history a little bit. Instead of going to Ohio, they're now operating north of the border as part of SAR's business car fleet. As soon as we clear the east switch and cautionary limits at Sparwood, we'll throttle up, dive onto the stairs, climb up through the RTC office to tunnel number 7. We're inside the RTC office here. Our train's climbing a 1.15% grade. It's going to do a 720 degree turn through here, climbing up towards tunnel number 7. Our coal train below is going to do 360 degrees, not for elevation gain, but to ensure that the entire train is hidden between staging and the scenic portion of the layout. We pop in the daylight at tunnel 7, milepost 72.45. We're still climbing a 1.15% grade here, and we're going to pass over several cut stone retaining walls. On the prototype, there's several of these walls visible from Highway 3 on the BC side of the pass. We'll cross Michelle Creek for the first time at Bridge 71.9. This area is known as the Michelle Creek Narrows. We're going to cross the Michelle Creek twice. The prototype actually crosses Michelle Creek 7 times through the area. As soon as we come off the top bridge, we're going to pass through a rock cut and pick up Michelle Creek on the right hand side as we sweep around the end of a peninsula 180 degrees before entering tunnel number 6. Inside tunnel 6, we're going to spin another 360 degrees through the RTC office. However, this time we're going to exit to the right and come out along the shores of Summit Lake. We'll have another quick panoramic view here. In the distance, the climb from tunnel 5 up. Staging yards are underneath. This is the tunnel 6 area. I just finished putting in this scenic divider here. I connected the lighting valance fascia with the upper deck fascia, splitting the scene in 2. It didn't flow as a single scene, and splitting it in half has really helped. We're going to emerge up along the shores of Summit Lake, This is the BC-Alberta border. Summit Lake actually flows to the west and ties into Michelle Creek. This is known as Crowsnest on the railroad, and if you look above the train, you can see that Highway 3 also uses this narrow gap to cross the Continental Divide. We're going to come to a stop at the east switch at Crowsnest here. This is the former location of tunnel number 7. This area went through a massive renovation. That's all covered in the Crowsnest realignment playlist if you're curious. As we turn to the right past underneath Highway 3, we're going to enter the oldest section of the layout. The scenery here is 18 plus years old and is in need of a major revitalization. If you look closely between the backdrop and the tree line, you can see some gaps. I've actually been poaching aspen trees from here to be used over at the Tunnel 6, Tunnel 7 area. The tracks now hug the north shore of Island Lake, second lake that we come across in quick succession through here. This wall is 46 feet long, and I think this best exemplifies my thoughts on end scale in a large space. 2 50-plus car trains can be seen here, yet they're both swallowed up by the scenery. Our stacked train cleared up at Crowsnest and we're again on the move. Just beyond the train is the former site of Summit Limeworks. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute or two. This whole area of track along here is known to crews as the Snakepit for the multiple reverse curves along Island Lake and the upcoming Crowsnest Lake. The shed in the foreground is going to come out, and this area that the train is passing over will become the new location of the Summit Limeworks. I've got big plans for this area as well as the area to the east. If you're curious what those plans are, check out the April 21 layout update video. I go into detail there. We're going to sneak into the siding at West Sentinel here and run around a loaded westbound potash train holding main track. Sentinel is the site of a 3-track yard that was primarily used to marshal loads and empties in and out of Summit Lime. Of course, with the industry no longer active, you won't find the yard full of covered hoppers. I am, however, using it to store some pre-production samples of some models that I'm testing out. We've left the east switch at Sentinel behind. We're out on main track and we can do 40 mile an hour. We've been pinched back to 20 miles an hour since leaving cautionary limits Sparwood. This is the highest point on the layout, and with the upcoming realignment, this is likely going to lose about 2 inches in elevation. There is a really cool vertical curve on the prototype at the west switch at Sentinel I do want to maintain, so I'm going to have to keep a little bit of elevation here. We're going to enter the pink plains and start a downhill drift through a bunch of multiple reverse curves. Once all the realignment work is done through this area, the truss bridge we're about to cross will mark the spot of the new east switch Sentinel. The bridge will likely have to come out to make way for the east switch, but this through plate girder will stay. We're at the end of an aisleway here, and we're going to duck through the backdrop into 27 feet of hidden track. I don't like to see trains on both sides of an aisle. I think it destroys the illusion of distance. So I make sure there's enough hidden track to hide even my longest trains before they emerge on the opposite sides of an aisle. We're going to roll out from under Highway 3 here, cross the west switch at Burmis, milepost 49.9, and then cross the Crowsnest River. Burmis is the site of a 27-foot long siding. There's a backtrack off of that and an industry off the backtrack. Logs are brought down from the hills by truck and transloaded onto bulkhead stake flat cars. Loads are forwarded on to points east by Nellie, the Nelson to Lethbridge road switcher. Empties are returned by Lenny, the Lethbridge to Nelson road switcher. Burmis is also the top of SAR's pusher district, and there's a crossover at milepost 48.7. The crossovers are used to facilitate the removal of manned mid-train pusher sets. We're going to cut our speed back to restricted here. We're approaching a pusher set around the corner holding main track, waiting for a westbound coming up the hill. This set assisted the potash train that we passed at Sentinel up the hill from Cowley. It's now waiting to return light to the pusher base at Pincher. Our meet today is CP9679. That's the empty coal train that left Fort Macleod the same time we left Sparwood. While the vast majority of coal heads west from Sparwood, there is an eastbound movement that cycles between Sparwood and Thunder Bay, Ontario. This train is configured 211, while certainly overkill for empties heading west. All that power will be needed for the loaded climb from Sparwood up to the Continental Divide at Crowsnest. Once CP9679 cleared up, the RTC opted to shuffle the pushers over into the siding and allow us to depart first down the big hill. After leaving east siding switch Burmis, milepost 47.8, the railroad crosses Highway 507. Just east of Highway 507 at milepost 47.2, the railroad begins its descent towards Cowley on a 1.85% grade. Speed for this section of track is maximum 20 mile an hour, with further restrictions on heavy eastbound movements. As we drop down our first bit of tangent, headed towards the top end of Drawbar Alley, directly below the train you can see Tunnel 4. Tunnel 4 marks the west end of the lower level of the layout. We're drifting through the S-curves that the area crews affectionately call Drawbar Alley. This is the absolute worst part of the climb from Cowley up to Burmis, and if trains are going to have trouble, this is where it's going to be. As we approach the end of the peninsula and the cut at 46.15, an interesting thing happens. Both east, west, and center points of the layout all line up. Directly below the cut at 46.15 is Sparwood at 90.1, and below that is Fort Macleod at milepost 0. As we come out of the cut, we're wrapping 180 degrees around the end of a peninsula, following the Crowsnest River down towards tunnel number 5. This is where we first saw that stack train at the beginning of the video, and if you look off to your right, you'll see our departure point from the Sparwood staging yards next to the units on the point of that empty sulfur train. Tunnel number 5 is milepost 45.2 on the layout, and it's the east end of the upper deck. We'll dive through 5, spin 450 degrees through 30 feet of hidden track, and emerge onto the lower level at tunnel number 4. Tunnel number 4 is located at milepost 42.85. The bridge you see here is kind of an amalgamation of several bridges on the CP, mostly inspired by the one close to Brockett. This bridge was scratch built using Central Valley truss bridge parts and micro-engineering girders. The scenery through here was completed back in 2013, and it's the first area where I started using static grass. Unfortunately, about 5 years ago, I had a water line break and the area suffered water damage. One day I'm going to have to go back in here and do some touch-up work. The bonus to that is I'll finally be able to address tunnel number 3 here. Over the years, this is just starting to drive me more and more crazy. I don't like the way it blends into the backdrop, and I know I can do better, so I'm going to have to do something about that. We're directly underneath the east switch at Burmis here, wrapping around the end of a peninsula. The trees through this area are all 25 plus years old, and the new techniques I'm using produce better trees, so there's a good chance that I'll eventually go in and reforest the whole area. As we come out of tunnel number 2, we get to an area of the layout that's had rough scenery on it for a number of years with no progress. And that usually means that I'm not happy with something. If you pay attention, the train will get progressively darker here. And the reason for that is that the benchwork projects out into the aisle away from the upper level and lighting valance by a few feet. Thus, rolling stock doesn't get the proper light. I've got plans to hack the benchwork off here and push everything closer underneath the lighting valance. That'll also help my pusher crews as the Burmis crossovers directly above this area. As we come through the last few rock cuts, track speed bumps up to 40 mile an hour for the run to tunnel number 1. Tunnel number 1 is milepost 39.9, and after the train enters it, it'll spin another 27 feet through hidden track before emerging on the opposite side of the aisle at West Cowley, milepost 35.4. Cowley is home to a paper plant, the largest industry on the layout. It generates enough traffic to warrant its own local from Fort Macleod. I've done 2 videos covering the operations at this plant, operations 04A and 04B. Check them out if you want to know what goes on here. To the east lies a 4-track yard used for storing off spots and marshalling traffic in and out of the paper plant. Beyond that is the big curve heading towards East Cowley. Minimum radius on the layout is 32 inches for visible curves. They all tend to be at the end of peninsulas. For inside curves such as this, they're usually 48 inches or bigger. We're just rolling past the industry switch for the paper plant and over the east switch at Cowley, milepost 33.35. Another 48-inch radius curve brings us back along the 46-foot wall. We're now on track that was realigned as a result of the construction of the Old Man River Dam in the 80s. The bridge you see here is actually a fill on the prototype, but I wanted to honor a friend of mine who grew up in the area. So this bridge is crossing Millsie's Coulee. We're descending a 1% grade, headed towards the Castle River crossing. The original line had a steel trestle on it that couldn't be submerged, so this bridge was built in its place high up on concrete towers. A friend of mine who worked for CP at the time managed to get the engineering drawings for this bridge. Another friend reduced them to N scale, and I scratch built it directly from those plans with no selective compression. We're climbing a 1% grade here after crossing the Castle River. The old line went further north to cross the river, and the eastern end of that alignment can be seen here. We're going to turn left towards Pincher. The chunks of scenery in the background are what's left over from the Crowsnest realignment. As mentioned earlier, Pincher is the base of SAR's pusher operations, and you can see one set sitting on the ready track here. The hamlet of Pincher Station was once the site of several elevators and a passing siding. The elevators are long gone, and the siding, too short for today's railroading, has been relegated to car storage. The one remaining industry, a seed cleaning plant, is serviced by the paper plant local. I'm going to work on scenery from this point to the east end of the layout in the first part of 2022. This is right underneath the Tunnel 6 and Tunnel 7 area. With that mostly done, I can focus on this. It's always a good idea to have your upper level done before you work on the lower level. Of course, I'm going to have to deal with this telepost again. As it stands now, plans are to wrap it in styrene and make it look like an old abandoned feed silo. One of the signature scenes on the Crowsnest sub is located on this stretch. It's the crossing of Highway 3. The bridge is painted various shades of action red and really stands out. Just after we cross this highway, we're going to pop back into the backdrop, spin through the RTC office 360 degrees, come out underneath the stairs, and arrive at Cautionary Limits, Fort Macleod. We've traveled 530 feet from Cautionary Limits to Cautionary Limits. That's 16 scale miles. Took us about 50 minutes. Average time for a freight's anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Road switchers take longer. They can run up to 2.5 to 3 hours to complete their work. Thanks for joining me on this trip across the layout, everyone. If you like what you see, smash the like button, think about subscribing. I want to thank my current subscribers and especially my members. You guys have really kept me focused for the last year and I do appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Happy Festivus, and we'll see you next time.